All right, welcome back, everybody. You're here for part two of the Civil War flip video. So we're gonna use our books again. Gotta have our books. Yeah. All right, cool. Now, just like yesterday, I'm gonna lead you. I'll get you through the notes. I'll give you a chance to answer maybe a couple of questions. I'm not gonna do as many as I did yesterday, so just be mindful of that. But if you, the student, would like to independently kind of quiz yourself on some of those questions and see how you would do with the knowledge you'll gain, then by all means, go for it. So kids, we're going to pick it up from right here on chapter 8. So I'm going to ask you to go there now. Pause me. Okay, cool. You're ready. So let's dive in. After the causes of the Civil War, what comes of the Civil War? We'll hit a couple battles. We'll talk about some prominent people and the end result. So Abraham Lincoln is going to get elected in this election of 1860. Now, this election will be dominated by that political party called the Republican Party. Remember, they're the little elephant. Now, that's the birth, right, during the Civil War of that party. So Lincoln was a good choice because the Democrats, who were the Southern states' political party, they could not agree on a candidate. Why? Because they were split about what to do with secession. Remember that state that seceded yesterday? That was South Carolina. So because they couldn't agree on whether or not to, really officially break up, the Democrats were split. They didn't have a candidate. Now, Abe did oppose the extension of slavery in territories. There's another answer for you. But he was hoping to contain it. The Republican Party wanted to contain slavery. They weren't trying to eliminate slavery. They were against it in their moral minds, in their hearts and minds. But to keep the U.S., the Union together, they were okay with containing slavery. Does that make sense? Not that they were okay with it personally, but they were hoping to keep it in the South. Remember that fact. Now, Lincoln won the popular vote with only 39%. Now, he won the Electoral College with a great number of states in the North, but he wasn't very popular at all. Think about that. Why? Because a lot of people in the South who were voting did not like Mr. Lincoln. He was the evil genius to their thwarting plan of slavery. Now, the Confederacy is going to rise out of this divide. Who is the Confederacy? Well, if you look at that map, you're going to see like a division, and you see the two flags. The United States will get divided into a North and a South. The Confederacy is the Confederate States. They are the Southern states. They're going to change their name. So let's look at this. Go to chapter 9 in your book, and let's get some answers. Ready? Okay. Now, the Confederacy is going to be the rise of the Southerners. Now, Abe Lincoln gets that win in the election of 1860. Now, the Southerners, they look at him like he is the devil. Why? Because he represents the possibility that those slaves that they love to use for their economics are going to go away. So the Southerners do not look kindly on Mr. Lincoln at all. So South Carolina is going to be the first state to leave or break up. I'm going to use the word secede from the Union. Look at that little gif. They're out. Now, this means that they are going to break up. Now, South Carolina is the first. Now, you got to remember them because they are a pesky one. Now, South Carolina will be followed by 7 other states, and eventually it'll lead to a total of 13 total states. Now, we're going to get some more answers for this page, so let's go to chapter 9 one more time. Ready? Chapter 9. Now, the seceded Southern states form the Confederate States. Now, those states will elect a president too. It's going to be a different president. This is going to be Mr. Jefferson Davis. There's his name. He's going to be the president of their Southern Confederate States. Now, the Southerners had a motivation. They wanted slavery, obviously. But the reality was that they did not want to invade the North. They were just as wary of a war as the North was. Why? Because the political and economic differences were so big between the two sides that they weren't eager to try to find that war. They weren't looking for it. They just wanted their states' rights. They wanted to be left alone. Leave us alone. Leave us with our slaves. Leave us with our economics and our cash crops. We want to be left alone. That's what they wanted. Jefferson Davis, he too, as president, did not want a war with the North. He thought it would be bad for their business. But they're going to get a war. So there's a question right there. You can pause it and tackle it if you like. All right. Now, you can go with me, shall we? Let's try a question. Now, I'm going to read this. Now, this is a primary source document. It means it's an eyewitness account. Now, when I look at the bottom of that document, it tells me who said it, who wrote it, a date, a place, a time. I get information there. So it gives me clues to the answer. So let's read it. The states have their status in the Union, and they have no other legal status. The Union, and not themselves separately, procured or obtained, gave their independence and their liberty. President Lincoln, he says this. So I look at the question that says, what issue was Lincoln addressing in this excerpt? So I'm going to look at the answers real quick. You can do that. Okay, a couple of these seem really off when I connect it to the clues in the passage. So right away, militias and representatives. It's not about, doesn't even mention those. And there you go. There's your 50-50. Choose. What do you think? Is it about unalienable rights or the ability of states to secede? What do you think? If you chose secession, you were correct though, 100%. Round of applause for you. So let's get going. This is what the map would have looked like. Notice those states in the middle. Those would be the border states. Those states had slaves but didn't secede. Interesting, right? Little tricky trick right there. Kentucky, West Virginia, and Missouri had slaves, didn't leave the Union, stayed in the North. Interesting. So Lincoln wins, and he gives his inaugural address. What does that mean? It means that it is a speech that is his introduction speech as president. Now, let's get some answers on your bubbles. Yes, on chapter 10. Ready? So let's start at the bottom. So first, he discusses states. The Constitution says that all states have to agree. Now, this is his belief. We cannot secede. We cannot separate. We have to stay together because the Constitution says so. He also addresses the challenges of that secession. He again states, South Carolina, hey man, you can't leave because it's not in accordance with that Constitution. We the people. The Constitution was based on keeping the U.S. together. This is his argument as president. This is what he's telling the South. Guys, you can't leave. So the Union, he argues, is of the people. Popular sovereignty, remember? In other words, you state don't have the right to take your people out of America. You have to stay with us. And last but not least, again, secession. It was not legal in his eyes according to the Constitution. So his whole first speech is about secession, keeping the Union together. He was hyper-focused on keeping the states united, which won't happen. So what does this mean? Let's go to chapter 11. Take a look at that graphic. You'll see 3 pictures on the left leading to one on the right. Ready? Let's fill them in, those 3 pictures. I'm going to match them up. So first we have sectionalism as a problem because all the little sections of the United States are all fighting. So that's your first answer in your first square there. Then the second square shows us that those states like South Carolina, they wanted their states' rights. And so they were causing problems because they wanted to do what they wanted to do. And then that third square, we had slavery. Slavery was the issue. So this is all leading up to the Civil War. There's your answer there leading to the right, the Civil War. Now we're going to fill it in by looking at the next slide. Yes, so let's do chapter 11 and add to that picture. You ready? We're going to add to that picture now. We're going to begin the war. Now, where does the war, the fighting, actually begin? It begins here. So let's start with that. Now, the Fort Sumter attack is the beginning of the war. Look at your box and fill it in. Fort Sumter was a federal fort where troops were being held, guess where? Off of the coast of South Carolina, stinking South Carolina. There they are again. Now, Fort Sumter was under the threat of the South to remove their troops. So the South basically said, hey guys, I'm sorry, let me go back there real quick. The South basically said, hey guys, you have to leave. And the Union troops said no. And Lincoln's like, no, we're not surrendering. See the gift? No retreat, no surrender. We're staying. Now, look at those 2 boxes. I want you to connect them to your picture. Do you see the pictures there at the bottom? Now, the troops at the fort were running out of food, and they were looking for aid from Lincoln and the North. But Lincoln, he didn't want to surrender the troops, but the South didn't want to allow any help to come into the fort. So they were blockaded. Blockaded means they were prevented from getting any relief. So on April 12th, 1861, what did the Southern Confederates do? Boom, 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 boom. They start firing on the fort. This is the beginning of the war. Fort Sumter in South Carolina. Now, I'm going to look here at a question real quick, and if you'd like to, I skipped it, but it's on your page. If you want to tackle it, by all means, try it, okay? But I'm going to move forward. So I'm going to go here to the next chapter. I'm sorry, the title's not at the top, but look for the South strategy page. What did the South have that the North didn't? Let's look at that. The South had a couple of good things going for them. Number one, they knew the lay of the land. They knew their terrain. That was what made them kind of powerful because they knew where to go in the geography of the land. Also, they were claiming self-defense because, in other words, hey man, you guys wouldn't leave us alone, so we had to attack because you all in the North kept bugging us. You didn't want us to secede, but we had the right to. And their motivation was very loyal. They were loyal to their territory. They were loyal to their states. They were fiercely loyal. Now, their leader was this great general. His name is Robert E. Lee. He was actually a general in the Northern Army. Lincoln wanted him to lead his army in the North, but Mr. Lee was a Virginian. That's in the South, and he says, there's his loyalty. He's like, I cannot betray my Southern brethren. And so he becomes the head general of the Southern Confederate armies. All right, now let's go to the next page, yeah? Now we're gonna look at the North. The North has advantages too. Now they've got some big ones. They got some big guns. Now Winfield Scott, he wants to strangle the South. And he's going to want to strangle it through the Anaconda Plan. Now, kids, you don't have to write anything on this page. I'm just showing it to you. No, you don't have to write anything. So he actually wants to strangle the South with their resources. And that's what he aims to do. So let's look at that page. Now let's look at the North strategy. Now here are your circles. Get your answers now. The advantages. What were the advantages to the North? They had factories. They had lots of factories, so that means they could supply stuff. They could make goods. They also had transportation because they had railroads in the North developed. Remember the Industrial Revolution? Also, they had telegraphs. So those little communication devices could help the Union troops and generals communicate with each other, which the South didn't have very many of. Now, their motivation, they wanted to stop the South from doing what they did best. Block their war products, block their foreign goods, and block their cotton, which was what? Cash crop money. If the South didn't have money, they didn't have an army. That was what the North was intending to do. Now, you got to meet this man because you know Lincoln already. That is General Ulysses S. Grant. He's on the $50 bill. He will be the Supreme General of the Northern Armies of the Potomac, meaning the Union Army. Eventually, he's going to be Lincoln's right-hand man. And Lincoln went through a lot of generals, by the way, because his generals were not as good as those Southern generals. But Ulysses S. Grant will prove to be the best of all of them, and he will be the ultimate general there. All right, so I'm going to turn the page here. You ready? Now I'm going to keep going through info, kids, and if you want to stop and do some questions, I'm totally okay, but I'm going to keep going through this info, okay, because I want to get through this with you today. Now let's look at a couple of battles. All right, find the chapter on the Battle of Antietam. Antietam. So why this battle? Why look at this battle? There are many battles of the Civil War. We're only going to look at a couple. Why this battle? The Battle of Antietam was the single bloodiest day in the war. Over 6,000, 7,000 soldiers total killed in one day. Now, Antietam is in Maryland. That's kind of southern colony right there. Maryland, yeah? See that on the map? Now, we're going to fill in our table here. Now, the winner of the Antietam battle will be the Union North. So let's look at that a little bit. Now, the Union Army is being led by Ulysses S. Grant. Now, the Confederate Army is led by General Lee. Jefferson Davis and Lee both have to retreat after this loss. It was a tough loss because the Southerners wanted to prove to Europe that they could beat the North. And if they could prove to Europe they could beat the North, then what did that mean? That meant Europe would start buying and taking them seriously, and they'd be a real partner in the world. Now, the Union wins a long battle, and they don't chase off after the Southerners and the Confederates going south. They let them be. Now, look at that picture right there. That's a very famous picture of Abraham Lincoln meeting General George McClellan after the battle was done. That's one of the first pictures of war from the Civil War. Now, this battle took place in a super big field in Maryland at Antietam. Now, the reason why Antietam is so big is because it leads Lincoln to see with his own eyes what war is really like. And what he does next is a big deal. What does he do next? The Emancipation Proclamation. Turn the page. Yes, Emancipation Proclamation. You can read this if you like, and I'm going to skip that. I'm going to go straight to the info. What's up? The Emancipation Proclamation. This is a biggie. This is a government document signed and sealed by Lincoln. Emancipation means to set free. Proclamation means to announce. So Lincoln is going to announce the freedom of, if you're guessing, you know where. Excuse me. So let's fill it in. When? After the victory of Antietam, Lincoln proposes and writes this document. He says, our purpose should be to have a moral purpose. So in other words, we shouldn't just fight to keep the Union together. We should fight for the freedom of the slaves. So we should free the slaves. But here's the thing. The Emancipation Proclamation only frees the slaves in the southern states. Think about that. If the African Americans in the North are already free. But then you have those border states. Remember those border states? Those slaves were not let free. Little trick right there. Now, the Emancipation Proclamation frees the slaves in the South. Why? He wants to demoralize the South. He also wants to prevent the Confederates from using the slaves as troops because they were running out of troops through the war. He also wants to prove to the African American community, I'm on your side now. I'm going to fight for you. This is just changing his mindset. He's not just trying to keep the Union together anymore. Now he's thinking about freeing the slaves. That's what it's going to become. And look at that quote at the bottom. I never in my life felt more certain that I was doing right than I do in signing this paper. This document is a serious one to him, and it meant, in his mind, the turning of what he felt he needed to be as a president. Love the Emancipation Proclamation after Antietam. Love it. So let's find the page titled The Battle of Gettysburg. All right, turn your pages a couple of times. Now, Gettysburg is a real big deal. Gettysburg was a field in Pennsylvania. Now, it's a northern state. Now, why is this a big deal? Because General Lee pushed his Confederate army north, and he was interested in attacking Washington, D.C., the capital. So by invading the north, he's showing, I can take you guys on, the Union troops in the north. Now, he will lose this battle that lasts about 3 days. And the amount of soldiers that died at this battle totaled over close to 50,000. It was such a massive, massive massacre. There was so much death. The pictures that we have from that battle are really graphic. It was just a huge entanglement. Now, Lincoln, at the victory, he will dedicate a ceremony for the soldiers who died here because it was so soul-crushing. Even the Union who won, they cut off the Confederates from coming north, but they just felt horrible about this win. Gettysburg in Pennsylvania today is a park. It's a monument. It's a memorial park. It's said to be filled with the ghosts of the soldiers who died there. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. And so Lincoln gives his Gettysburg Address, where he addresses the public in a most solemn manner to give honor to the men who died at Gettysburg because it was such a horrible 3 days of death. So that Gettysburg, really big moment in the war. It's the turning point. At this point, the South is not going to have a chance to win at all. Now, you can look at your battle map. We'll do that in class, but I'm going to skip that right now, okay? No coloring necessary. Let's end the war here. The war must end, and the Union North must win. How do we know? Well, because we got America now. So, who? Lee, General Lee meets General Grant in Virginia. Not just at any old place. Why? Excuse me, what? Lee's army is going to surrender. Now, at this point, they're really depleted. Now, this is occurring in April of 1865. At this point, General Lee is seeing that he's got no resources coming in. Their money's cut off. They've lost too many men, too many deaths. They can't replace them with the slaves because the Emancipation Proclamation has freed the slaves in the South. So General Lee realizes this is going to be the official ending of the war. This is too many losses, too many resources. My men haven't eaten. They're haggard. They're hungry. They're destitute. They're dead. This is it. He can go no more. Even though Lee wants to, he sees that his men are suffering. So he meets at Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia to give the terms of his surrender. As a matter of fact, when he does surrender, General Grant, in an act of honor, allows all the generals and men of the Confederate Army to be pardoned, meaning they could be let go and go back home. As a matter of fact, they even let him keep their horses, and their weapons as a sign of respect. Good choice, bad choice, who knows? So there we go, kids. There it is, the end of the Civil War. So we will talk in class. Thank you for being here. You guys have been awesome. Get your notes done. Ask me questions if you don't know. I'll be there for you.